If you missed the first two episodes, they're in the description below. The first episode, we touched on the lay of the land, what we're doing here. So the skinny is Pavilion gets a lot of leads. They come on our website, they click the join Pavilion button, they go through the checkout process. And then right before they go to swipe their card, we've got around an 85% drop off rate there. So our goal is to decrease that drop off rate by doing some really personalized outreach. And one of those personalized outreaches that we know works is connecting a prospective Pavilion member with their local chapter head. But our goal is to do this at scale and not just kind of hunt and peck and copy paste and kind of think about what to write and then paste. So we think we can leverage AI to make this process a lot more effective. And that's why we're working with Brian. And I'm super fired up. So that was episode one. We set the stage. Episode two, we dove into prompt engineering, which was like really, really helpful for me personally to learn. So check that out if you're looking to improve how you do prompt engineering. With which, Brian, I feel like that's like the foundational work for everything AI, right?
For sure. And prompt
Yeah.
engineering changes all of the times. New models are being released, new techniques are being discovered, and new artifacts of prompt engineering show up that you then need to control for. So we're actually going to be doing a second round of prompt engineering on this new intro as part of this episode.
Fantastic.
Great. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and give a little bit of a reminder on how we were doing things last time and what we're going to be doing this time. So in building our first intro, which I'm going to show here, this is the one that we're not going to use. I'll go ahead and share my screen. In building this first workflow with Copy AI, which is the tools we use because it has tools to help you do prompt engineering. It's basically AI doing prompt engineering for you. And that's this workflow that we built here. In these steps, we went through a few stages. First, we got the LinkedIn for the prospective member and for the chapter head. We had Copy go in and scrape those LinkedIn profiles and just summarize the text. And then Copy was actually summarizing that info for us and then using those summaries, person one detail, person two. So it's taking those extracted summaries and then writing that introduction. And we did a fair amount of prompt engineering around this to improve it. But this latest version, which I'm going to show you, I'm really happy with, and it addressed the issues that we found last time. So a few of the issues that we found last time where every once in a while it felt wordy, sometimes it felt too generic, and also sometimes it was writing an intro and then saying, let me know if you'd like me to intro you, which of course is what it was doing in the message. And so I've made some changes to these prompts. I'm just going to walk through what those changes are and how they work. And then, Josh, don't worry, you're not going to be sitting on the sidelines for future episodes. We're going to be applying these prompt engineerings in new template structures that we built together. But we'll take it step by step. So first off, we're using Claude 3, one of the newest models, and we're using Sonnet. And Sonnet was actually trained on XML data, meaning that sometimes it can pull in reference information a little more easily using this HTML style tag. So basically just, this is the chapter head background, open tag, and then / close tag, prospect background. And one of the reasons we did this is so that we could actually converse with the AI about the roles, the people that we're introducing. So instead of person one to person two, it's prospective member and chapter head. And that we noticed that helped improve just the way in which the information was framed quite a bit. And then we've been really explicit here, right? In message introducing the prospective member to the chapter head, use their backgrounds to highlight commonalities and suggest connecting to discuss Pavilion and the local Pavilion chapter. And I think this has really been, we went through multiple versions of like, what do we put into prompt? What do we put into background? And this version of back prompt I really like because it is getting to the context that this intro is being written in. You're making an introduction, and the point is get someone to join Pavilion. And I think that captures a lot of the early feedback, Josh, that you had so far, just in terms of getting that introduction to feel like it's a Pavilion-sponsored introduction.
Yeah, and one of the things that we touched on in the last episode is how you write the prompts. Like you're instructing. I mean, my favorite way to explain it is you're just like instructing a human, like somebody on Upwork or somebody, to do a task for you. And I know everybody has probably done that at some capacity, whether it's an employee or it's Upworker or it's an intern, whatever. I love how like plain and direct this is, introducing the prospective member to the chapter head, use their backgrounds to highlight commonalities and suggest connecting to discuss Pavilion at the local chapter. So for those of you who are not in maybe a B2C membership type of business, excuse me, this can apply to maybe you're introducing a prospective customer with an existing customer or something like that. Just kind of as we go through this, think of ways that you can apply it to your sales process. But I love this, Brian. I love the changes that you made. I'm excited to see what it spits out.
Yeah, and building on that, there were a few other things that we did to tighten up our communication with the AI. So one way of putting this is in our previous introductions, we were chatting very casually, like we were chatting like we would with a person, but we would often communicate our instructions in different ways and,
Right.
referring to the same thing in different terms. And so we've really tightened this up with background. So now it's very clear, write an introduction message is what we're up to here. And what you'll notice is introduction message shows up over and over and over again. And what we learned by doing this is that the AI was much better at applying each subsequent instruction to the same entire message instead of just aspects of the message, which is part of what we were seeing. But let's get into this background. So you're an expert community manager for Pavilion, helping professionals in the B2B SaaS industry build their network. You are skilled at introducing people and facilitating warm connections. Your goal is to find commonalities and encourage discussion about the value of the Pavilion membership. So here you can see that we're taking this prompt and we're giving a really clear role that has supporting instructions about what about that role we're trying to apply in this case. This is a combo of 3 or 4 prompts that we tried last time that I really like how the results come out now. And then in terms of structuring the message itself, write an introduction message directed at the prospective member, introducing them to the chapter head. One of the things that was coming out in some of our previous intros was it wasn't always clear who the intro was being made by. And so this is making that explicit. And then we left in that instruction of, write the introduction as if connecting to friends via LinkedIn DM. That helped really well. Tone, lighthearted, brief, and casual has proven to continue to work. And this is something that Copy AI recommended in terms of enhancement to our prompt, which is to limit the amount of text explicitly either to a couple paragraphs or in my case, to 6 sentences. By designing it to be 6 sentences, I was able to really get that light, quick intro format that I was looking for. And then being really explicit about what the structure should be. So a greeting, I love this new addition. In parentheses, you can just put EX colon example and even use a tag. So in this case, hi prospect name. One sentence specifically representing the most compelling reason for the prospect to connect with the chapter head, the goal, the thing that we're really trying to do here with our intro. 2 short bullet points of other things they could learn from each other. So we saw in a lot of the other messaging that AI actually had a lot that it could offer in terms of points of connections and reasons for connecting, but sometimes it could get pretty wordy. So doing it in this bulleted format, both is easier to read on a mobile phone, works better in introductions generally, and helped us control for that wordiness. And then finally, brief close with no additional commentary. Example, looking forward to hearing what you learned from each other. And the message with no additional commentary. So you'll see here, I keep saying no additional commentary. Claude specifically was trained on chatbots. And so everything that it authors can tend to have extra additional context at the end, sort of summarizing what was just communicated, because that's what chatbots do. And by saying with no additional commentary, we're turning off that feature. And this is something that can constrain other models too. It's not just specific to Claude that this works, but with Claude, it is especially helpful. And then just from overall tuning, we're keeping the temperature at the recommended creativity, pretty creative. And we're using the most robust Claude model today, Sonnet, because it's really good with reasoning. So let's go ahead and test this workflow and we'll show this in action. So I'm going to take, Josh, your profile today and as our prospective member, and we'll pick on our favorite friend, Elizabeth as our chapter head intro, who's our chapter head over in DC. And we're going to go ahead and run this test workflow. While this is running, you'll notice that I removed from the previous this summarization step. So it is actually a best practice most of the time that if you're pulling in a lot of data for AI, to summarize it into a format, or have AI summarize it for itself into a format that then gets after the main points that you're looking for. And that usually does work really well. But in the case of an intro, we actually want it to look through all of the LinkedIn profile and be creative in finding those points of connection. And so by taking out the summarization step, we actually got a lot better intros and much more creativity. And here we go with our final intro. Let's show that out. So here it is. Hi, Josh. You have to connect with Elizabeth Irving, the VP of Marketing and Customer Success at MarketMuse. As a seasoned demand gen leader yourself, I think you two would really hit it off discussing strategies for fueling the marketing engine. She's built MarketMuse from the ground up. Approaches to nurturing up and coming marketers on your team. I mean, those are killer. Short, brief, clear intros. And then it added, and since you're passionate about the B2B SaaS space, I'm sure you'd have an engaging chat around driving efficient growth through content, marketing, events, and more, optimizing customer journeys for conversion. So this is my first time seeing this, by the way. Pretty clearly, the AI is doing 2 sub-bullets for each of the areas that it was looking for instead of just for one, but it's still pretty solid. And then she's also an envoy for the local Pavilion chapter, so I'm sure she'd love to share more about the value of getting involved. Look forward to hearing what you learned from each other.
So I like this because it's like it's like a no selling approach. Like it's going about this from a very like selfless way of, hey, I'm just trying to connect you two together, and you'll eventually, I know in the conversation they'll talk about it, but at the end of the day, it's our job to connect people to each other. And I think this does a really good job at doing that in a really like in a classy way is the kind of like the best way I'll describe that.
Great. Yeah, I love that. So, I feel really happy with this intro. Last time we were trying to just get to a intro that we like, but check it out when I retest it. So I can just retest this step. It will rewrite it, and you'll see it write, a fairly different kind of intro, generally speaking. So it looks like it's kept with that same format issue. So let's go ahead and see if we can correct that here. But, pulls out completely new points and also, frames it a little differently, and love that it's, keeping that close there, what we're looking for. So let's just go ahead and look at this format briefly and see. So we've got it to 6 sentences or less. That's good. 1 sentence specifically referencing the most common, and then let's say 2, why don't we put it this way? 1 bullet point specifically referencing the most common thing, 2 more short bullet points on the other things they could learn from each other. Let's just try that and see if that gives us something that's a little bit cleaner.
And I think another thing I'd want to, oh, interesting. Okay. That was quick.
Yeah, I feel like this is pretty spot on in terms of what you'd be looking for.
Yeah. I think if we were to make one tweak, and I'm curious if we can do this live, I would like to be more upfront that Elizabeth is the chapter head for that person's local chapter, just so if they're skimming in the email, they're like, oh, I'm not just randomly getting introduced to somebody, I'm getting introduced to the Pavilion chapter head in my city. So if we could add that as like a byline, I'd be interested to see how kind of that turns out.
Okay, so we could try it more. 1 sentence introducing the chapter head
As the local Pavilion chapter head.
as the local Pavilion chapter head.
Beautiful.
Why don't we try specifically referencing the most compelling reason for the prospect to connect with the chapter head, and then 2 more short bullet points. Let's give that a shot, see if that gives us a little bit closer to what we're looking for. And then we retest. Yeah, there you go.
Beautiful. And it even included DC area.
Yep.
Which was a scrape from her profile, which is nice.
And let's just try this retest again, see if we get a meaningfully solid follow-up.
So is this typically your approach, Brian? Like you kind of run one prompt and then you kind of run it a couple times just to see if you get some sort of consistency?
Well, so it's a great question. Yes, and the reason we use AI is it's not consistent, which is, I think, one of the big mental model changes that we need to make when we're working with AI. So it's along the lines of, have we given it reasonably good enough instructions that it creates something we would send, even if it's a little different than what we might have thought we were intending to send? Because of course, the more that you try to constrain what the AI actually does or says, the more off track it can get. Basically, it's kind of the narrower you get, the easier it is for it to make errors. And so we're trying to find that sweet spot of like creativity that mostly works, mostly follows the format, but even if it's different, we're still happy with it. And I think that's what we can see here. But this gives us our next real launching point, which is to say, okay, we've got a prompt that's reasonably working on this case. Now we want to go run it against a bunch of others, and that's where Zapier comes in. So anything else that you'd like to kind of add, or as we're wrapping up this prompt engineering step?
This is great. Yeah, let's scale
Great.
this thing.
Yeah, so now we want to prepare to scale. Of course, the ultimate end goal is to be able to wire this up to our CRM and have these intro messages spun up and sent out across a wide variety of triggers and decisions. That's our destination. We're now going to take our first real step towards moving beyond prompt engineering towards that kind of automation. And we're going to do that with Zaps, of course. So here you can see a Zap that I've built where what it's going to do is it's going to go into a Google Sheet. It's going to pull information from that Google Sheet. It's going to run the Copy AI workflow, and then it's going to update that sheet with the output. Something to understand about working with AI is that responses generally are not instant. And so there's two phases that there's the initial request. That's where you let the AI know, hey, I want you to do something for me. And then we use webhooks to capture the result. If you've used integrations or APIs before, you're probably used to it being pretty, simultaneous. You ask for a row ID and you get back a HubSpot record. But in this case, we're actually prompting AI to run a workflow. And then once that workflow is done, we need to capture the output. And that's what a webhook is for. And so these three stages cover all of that. And I'm going to take you step by step through those. Anything that you think would be helpful to clarify there, Josh, before we actually get into the walkthrough?
No, at least for me, I the way I kind of process this in my brain is that like copy.ai is it on first glance it appears that it is like Zapier where you create steps, and in that regard it is, but it's really an AI workflow tool. It's not and this is like something that I needed to actually clarify for a couple of people who were talking to me about it recently, is you're using a tool like Zapier, a workflow builder tool, to connect the dots to copy.ai for copy.ai to actually run. So I think that's like the one point of clarification, is that it's sort of like workflowception right here.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's kind of like the best way I can explain it. And this is like, I think like for people getting started, I think most companies do have access to Zapier for people to jump in. That's what I love about this whole thing, is it's no code, Brian.
Yep.
Just like anybody can jump in.
Yeah, and you've called out exactly why I've been so involved in the low code and no code movement, is that I've been believing for a long time that when AI capabilities came to town, the AI would be great to have, but actually getting it into our day-to-day work would be a big challenge. And that's where tools like Zapier and Coda can be super helpful. So let's look at how we set Zapier up. So I've done something pretty simple here. I've created a Google Sheet, which we can totally share as a part of this. And you can see that I've got my prospect LinkedIn profile, the chapter head LinkedIn profile, and then these three labeled areas: intro, scraped prospect, and scraped chapter head LinkedIn summary, and then trigger, yes, no. And the reason we're putting a trigger on is just so that we can add the information in and Zap won't automatically try to run it. We put in a yes when we're actually ready for it to take the next step. These three fields, now we didn't have to get back the scraped prospects LinkedIn summary or chapter head summary, but whenever I'm building the first iteration of an AI model, I really like to create as much visibility to the underlying data set as I can. And it's also a great asset to have eventually when we want to do something like enrich our HubSpot CRM. Hey, if we're going to have AI summarize a LinkedIn profile, let's capture that and store that for the long term. That's a really useful asset to have for many AI processes, not just this one. And just to see it in action, you can see, there's one intro that's been written. We've got another one here. And so I'm just going to get started right now. I'm going to take Josh's profile and I'm going to put him in as the prospect and then continue to pick on Elizabeth. Thank you, Elizabeth, as our chapter head. And so this is what it looks like to get a new row started. And all I need to do to fire it is press Y, and the Zap is now actively running. But there's our intro, came through as expected. We could copy and paste that into an email and send it right now. So let's go through the build steps with Zaps, just for those of you that are new to it. So we're just going to say create. And I found that this worked pretty well. When a trigger column is marked yes in PJ sheet,
Run a workflow.
Let's see, run a copy AI workflow. Thank you. And return a result. All right, let's give it a shot. A little more AI with AI here.
I mean, you can do the same thing in Copy.ai too. Like you can like create the workflow using AI. It's crazy.
All right, so there we go. We've got a new or updated sheet row. I think that looks like what we want.
Yep.
And then we're going to run the copy AI workflow. But now what we're going to do, what we want to do actually is update. Let's see here. Run a copy and return the result to the spreadsheet. See if that gives us a little bit better of a design to start with. There we go. That's what we're looking for. And then this will be update row instead of create, which I guess we can get into in a minute. So we'll just get into, this is reasonably close. Yeah, here we go. So we've got my account here. We're going to pick that trigger. Do the pavilion. There it is. Gonna pick that sheet one.
As like a Zapier nerd, I love that it titled the step for us instead of search new sheet row, because like that way people can just jump in and understand what's happening.
I'm a big fan of the AI that's been added here. Okay, so now we can test the trigger. We've got our sheet here ready to go. And it looks like it was successful in finding that trigger. So we're set. We've got a workflow to run. Account's been activated already. I'm going to go ahead and pull that, introduce prospective members. And this is where we're going to get that data from. So obviously we want the chapter head LinkedIn profile there and the prospective member LinkedIn profile right there. It's going to send us back a ton of information, which is great. We're going to test that step.
I'm curious how long it takes. Wow. Wait, did it really just run the workflow in?
It fired it in about 3 seconds. It's still running in the background.
Gotcha.
Or it should be. Let's see here. It has been going so fast that I haven't been able to catch it, but we will catch it eventually.
Nice.
All right. So what we wanted to actually do instead of create is we want to update a spreadsheet row. Same account, same sheet, and we're going to use that row ID. So this is where
custom, I think. Yeah,
we want to use custom row ID. There it is.
Nice.
Right. Click out of those boxes. There we go. And then here's where we're going to make the intro dump. So we get there it is. Outputs, write introduction email. That's what we want. And we'll go ahead and throw in those scraped profiles as well. So this is for the prospect, and this is for the chapter head. And we don't need to update anything else because we're done. We can test that step, just make sure it works, and publish. And there you go. We have ourselves a live Zap.
Boom.
So we'll go ahead and share, this sheet and the Zap for those of you that are curious about it and how it will work. Zaps are great, I think, in terms of just testing the API, making sure that things are working, running it against a sample set of data. A mistake that I often see people do is they get really excited about what AI can do, and then they run their whole database through it. And that's a fast pass to burning a lot of credits and then realizing you wanted to change a few things and needing to do it again. So I always recommend sort of thinking of it in, a base function. I'll typically run like 2 records, 20, 200, 2000. And what I've learned by doing that is that as I go each stage, I typically find that there are other issues that I want to target or address or fix. So we're going to take that same approach here, but we're actually going to do it now with the team. So the difference for us is that we don't want to just jump in and automate intros across the whole small set to start with. We actually want to build a human in the loop process. If you haven't heard of human in the loop before, there's two primary camps of thinking around AI. One is AI does the job for you. And the other is that you're a person doing a task and AI is helping you do it. What we just witnessed with Zapier is a human in the loop process. Yes, AI pulled together and built all my steps for me, but I went in and changed information as I went along. And that's, generally speaking, the best use case of AI that I've been able to find. Most of the things that you would do with AI that don't require human intervention, you would often just do with automation. So there's, at least in terms of go-to-market processes. So human in the loop is really what we're going for, and that's where Coda comes in. But before I jump into that, Josh, anything you want to add in terms of the Zap process?
No, I would just recommend folks that, because this is coming from me who was using copy.ai, ChatGPT as a step in a Zap. This gives you so much more control over the outputs. So highly recommend, if you've built Zaps like with like an OpenAI ChatGPT step, switch it out for something like a copy.ai workflow. Because what ended up happening is, like, I would get an output from OpenAI, this massive output, and I would have to actually use Zapier steps to parse the data and then return it into a value that I could use in our CRM. Versus this, you can actually have the workflow define the outputs. So anyways, highly recommend that, just migrating over to something like Copy if you're using this. And it's like super easy to spin up. As you saw, it took Brian like 5 minutes to build. So, I mean, really the hard work is prompt engineering, which, we touched on, right?
Yeah. And that's what we're setting up for our next build in public session. So prompt engineering can seem very daunting to try to figure out when it's you and the AI.
Yep.
And that's because it is. I think one of the things to just say right off the bat is, if you're trying to prompt engineer your way to an ideal AI outcome, you're probably going to be frustrated and you're probably going to be surprised in ways you'd rather not be. So one of the things that I really encourage people to do when they're building with AI is start with prompt engineering, but don't try to solve the whole problem there. Actually start working across a data set, because one of the things you can do to really improve the outputs that you get from AI is to give it examples. But the examples you give it are really powerful. So what we want to do is we want to have it, results, and then evaluate those results over time to find like a couple examples. We're typically looking for like around 3 that are, diverse in interesting and meaningful ways, really good examples of what we want, and can help guide the AI a little bit more in the direction that we want to take it in. So the way we're going to do that is with Coda. What I've done here is, on top of the workflows in copy.ai, I've built a little app in Coda that's going to actually allow Marshawn and other enrollment managers at Pavilion to test this out in real use cases. And again, we're going to start small, maybe just a couple intros a day to start with. That's what this tool is intended to set us up to do. And then we're going to kind of like dual track it now. So we're going to have the enrollment managers actually generating and sending intros from AI while evaluating it and giving feedback, and then wiring up the HubSpot automation. And then those two things are going to come together. Ideally, because we've actually used the intro on a few dozen messages, we've got some great examples, and we've got more trust that it will generate the kind of intros that we're looking for on the one hand. And then on the other, that we're going to bring into Coda our HubSpot data, prioritize it and rank it so that we can actually start speed running some of these intros based on what we're looking for. And I can see, Josh, that's what you're most excited for.
True gamer right here saying speed run. We're going to speed run through.
We're going to speed run this baby. All right, Zelda, Mario Brothers, and Copy.ai workflows.
There we
Let's go.
go. Sponsor us.
So I'll show you this app, and then we'll get the team intro to it. And I'm hoping that at our next Build in Public, we can actually show a few live examples of what's worked out.
That's good.
So I've just built a very simple, basic tool here where you can enter in, a new prospect. And obviously this would be information that eventually will just be a lookup to HubSpot or pre-populated for you. And then I'm going to go ahead and take your URL, just like we did with Sheets. But now I've built a little database here with all of the chapter heads. So we're going to just go ahead and select Elizabeth from this drop down. And now we're ready to have the AI write the intro. So we can see that the two LinkedIn profiles are here, and I'm going to go ahead and click that. And what that's doing is it's sending the request to Copy AI right now. So if I come over here, there you can see it processing. Thank you, Coda. All right, so you can see that processing is done. Now I can come over here and just say, all right, let's check for it. Let's bring it in. And Coda is now refreshing a table that has all of the AI generated tools. And here's the latest one. Boom, ready to go. So we can say this is a Josh intro to Elizabeth. So there's our subject. Here's the message. And we have when it was created on. And if, for example, I accidentally delete some info, I can just recopy the information in from the AI right there. But this is where we have our evals. So Josh, what evaluation do you have for the AI on this?
I would say, I think it did a really good job at creating those like three common connector points between myself and Elizabeth, because I'm Josh in this situation. So those actually do like align with me and my like, what I'm focused on in terms of marketing and what my LinkedIn profile says, which is huge. I love the reference to the chapter head at the end. I think it would be good as like for enhancement. It's kind of like what we discussed earlier is being a little bit more upfront that Elizabeth is the chapter head for the local DC chapter. So if I was the SDR in this situation, I would just maybe move exactly that point. And I honestly, like, I'm comfortable with leading with Elizabeth's role at her full-time job. Her full-time job is not to be the local chapter head for Pavilion. Her full-time job is VP of marketing at Market Muse. And if I were a marketer, it's almost, you're establishing that community connection early on with somebody at a reputable company. And then as a bonus, she's the local chapter member in my area. So that's fantastic. Now I can facilitate an actual authentic connection.
That's great. And I think, moving that chapter head disclosure to the top as a part of some of the examples that we build might help us kind of coach the AI in this direction, which is great. So we've got the message. Now we could easily, of course, just copy and paste this in, but Coda's got an integration with Gmail, which I like. So I can actually create the draft for the message in Gmail with just a click of a button. Saves me a bunch of copy and paste. It's ready to go. I can open my drafts and it will pull them up here. And here we go. This is the intro.
That's cool.
A few other things that I might do at this point is, I might put this on the next, paragraph. Maybe I'll do this and then I'll say, Brian, since this is coming from me to the two of you.
Yep.
I then would take this message, send it, come back in here, paste it in. There's my new format, and then mark this as sent. And now I'm ready to go for the next intro that I want to do. And so that's it. The enrollment team can just go one by one, send those messages, make those updates, put them together, build us a little lexicon, a little library of a few dozen. Actually, sent intros, we'll be able to compare that between what the AI generated and what was actually sent, and then use that to create a much more enhanced and reliable approach to future intros.
Beautiful. Thanks, Brian. I'm fired up, and I think we'll deploy this before the next Build in Public episode. Yeah. So I'll share some early feedback, and the good news is that our whole team has, as most teams do, have their inbox connected to the CRM, HubSpot or Salesforce, so we can actually like filter the messages that were sent as like a CC with the chapter head, and that way we can see like reply rates or efficacy of that in terms of did they sign up after getting that email versus the control, which is not getting that email. So
Yeah.
this is going to be really interesting to see how it progresses. But Brian, like as a sales manager, like I really like the approach here of like getting the team comfortable with using AI and having this human in the loop process where they can visibly see the email in their inbox, make edits that they need, give feedback back to the AI, and then click send. I really like that approach because that just establishes, I think like a level of trust with the AI with the team, because I think that's a lot of challenges that I personally had getting the team used to using AI is like trust in that it's going to do I don't want to say a better job, but like with the right training can do a better job than you can on a lot of different things. So it's getting that trust up front and getting them like that the short term wins before we start scaling it is going to be really important.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that as well. All right, well, so the journey begins. We're actually going to put this into production. Let's see how these intros do.
Whew, let's do it. Thanks everybody. See you next time.
See you next time.